John Bailey is here today, and he has spent some time writing a book about his experiences from some time back. He's already spoken to us about some of his escapades in a Kittyhawk, and he's about to tell you about this book. I'm sure he'll be delighted to tell you all about it. John, come forward.
Well, that's a hard act to follow, isn't it? I think I should have got Joe to do this for me. Really, I can empathise with him on a number of things, especially the reasons for getting into flying during World War II. I felt the same way, actually. Navy's no good, it's too damn far to swim if the boat goes down. And as far as marching around with a damn great pack on your back, no way for me. So flying it is. And if you've got to die, well, it's a quick way to go, usually. Anyway, first of all, I'd like to thank the Old Fliers group, and particularly the two Brians, especially Brian Hernan, who has given me some invaluable advice and prepared all these slides and things, which I hope I can handle all that. What prompted me to write these reminiscences? First of all, the Air Force got onto us some years ago, and the suggestion was that we silly old so-and-sos should jot a few notes down about our experiences in World War II before we dropped off the perch. And I suppose there's some sense in that, but I didn't take a lot of notice at the time, but later on when I thought about it, and you know, these days we see that everything's very, very different indeed to what it used to be in those days. After all, I came up, as many of us did, through the Great Depression, and we can remember quite a lot of that. And we had no cell phones and all these other gadgets. What are they? Bluetooth and Blueberries and God knows what. I don't know what they are, let alone how to work them. My mobile phone, I have to get my granddaughter to do it for me. And even then I can't remember which buttons to press to get the damn thing going. My son Kevin, who's here today, thankfully, he was supposed to fly the stints to the Lion up, but the airstrip was too boggy, so he couldn't get off and he had to drive up. But Kevin's always trying to prompt me to get on top of these gadgets, but I think I'm too old for that. Anyway, I might mention here that there's another chap. I only wish we could get him to come along. Anybody remember Alan Boyd? Alan is 97 now. He turned 97 on the 17th of March last, and he was one of the founder pilots of my old squadron, 75. And he lives up at the Air Force estate at Merriwa now. I only wish you were here. I've been on to him to finish writing. I think he's written his memoirs, but they haven't been published yet. He should publish them. That'd be really great. Anyway, back to my story. I was born in Carnarvon. I'm a sandgrover, died in the wool sandgrover, born here. And my mother was born on one of the inland stations in Carnarvon. My father was actually from South Australia, and he came over to the west with his uncle in 1894 when the gold rush was on to Kalgoorlie. Pop was 11 years old at that time, and he never went back. He stayed here in Western Australia. Wandered around the goldfields for most of the time, and then went up to Carnarvon and bought a camel team. You know, 24 camels pulling a big wagon to cut the wool from the inland, and of course that's how he met my mother on the station. And eventually Pop was put out of business by a chap called Charles Kingsford Smith, who came along with motor trucks, and they couldn't carry anything like what Pop had, a record load of 74 bales, and I've still got a photograph of that somewhere, and that he carted, but they'd cart about 10 or 12 or something like that on the motor trucks in those days, but they could do it so much faster and bring it down to Carnarvon. So that put the kibosh on the camel teams. in the 1930s depression, by that time we'd come down to Northern. We had a farm 7 miles west of Northern, and we went there in 1928. Great time to go farming. The Great Depression started in 1929, and in no time at all we were flat broke. Kicked off the farm, the bank repossessed it, but they couldn't sell it, so eventually my father did have a job for a short time driving a truck for Brisbane Wonderlick, but then he got sick of that because he'd been working for himself for a long time, so he shot through and went up to the goldfields. My mother got permission to go back to the farm, and in many ways we were better off than the city people, because at least we had some chooks and a cow and you know, things like that. The only transport was a horse and sulky, but fairly tough times. I used to do the rabbit trapping. I can still remember crunching through the frosty grass, going around the traps in bare feet in those mornings, yeah. Anyway, we got by. Eventually, I went to high school at Northern, and after I finished high school, came to Perth and got a job. I worked for FH Forting Company Limited in Murray Street, Perth, chemical people, until I joined the Air Force. I had the same reasons as Joe, as I've already explained. Anyway, that was in June 1941. I trained on tiger moths at Cunderton, and then went to Geraldton and trained on Ansons, and got my wings in December 1941, within a few days of Pearl Harbor. And as a consequence, instead of being posted to the UK to fly bombers, thankfully I avoided that one, and I was posted, 3 of us were posted to 25 Squadron flying Wirraways. Of course, I've never seen a Wirraway until I got there, but Ron McDonald, my flight commander, soon sorted me out. He could make the thing talk, and he taught me a lot of things that you can do with a Wirraway that you shouldn't probably. But Ron went on to command a Spitfire squadron up in Darwin. He got shot down, badly burnt, but I was in touch with him until 2 or 3 years ago, I think it was. I haven't heard from him lately. Anyway, flying the old Wirras was well, not a bad old machine. We got by with them. I had a very good and highly experienced navigator, observer, whatever they were. They did everything in those days. Jack West, Jack's still on deck. He's over in Victoria, and I keep in touch with him too. He's getting a bit frail now. And I was privileged to go with Kevin over to the Avalon Air Show in March last, and thankfully Jack's son brought him down to Avalon, so we had a few hours together. We, not long after I joined the squadron, you might remember on the 19th of November 1941, the Sydney disappeared, and in those days nobody knew a great deal about it. And I can't remember why now, or even if I was told why, but later on in 1942 we were detailed to fly up and down the coast between Geraldton and Onslow, along the beach, to see if we could find any signs of wreckage or bodies or whatever. I did that for 6 weeks, never found anything of course, but on one patrol heading north, the weather closed in and we had to overnight in Carnarvon. Well, that suited me because I was born there and had a lot of rallies, and I seemed to be able to do what I liked around Carnarvon, and nobody said much to me. But anyway, that night we had a bit to eat in the mess, and Jack said to me, hey, he said, we met some of those nurses from the hospital when we were coming through here a while back. He said, how about we take a few bottles of beer and go up to the hospital and see if we can, if any of the girls are off duty. So we were right, we trotted up there with a few bottles of beer, and 3 of the girls were off duty, and they said, come on in. It was a bit coolish, and had a little fire going in their quarters, in their living room. And they said, yeah, but kick those muddy flying boots off. Of course, they were covered in mud. We don't want mud all over the floor, so in we went. Knocked off the beer and we drinking the beer. And one of the girls said, do you guys like crayfish? We said, yeah, but why? So we got some here. They trotted out these crayfish and we had a pretty good feed. And we just about finished that and we knocked on the door. One of the girls went to the door and opened it, and there's two Royal Australian Navy officers there in their immaculate uniforms, and we just sort of looked up and said, "Hi, fellas," and you know, senior service and all that stuff. And the next thing they went. And I said to the lads, "Aren't they coming in?" She said, "No," she said, "they're really pissed off." She said, "They brought us the crayfish and you buggers have eaten it." I can understand their point of view, but it's not a bad idea to, you know, get one up on the Navy occasionally, or the senior service stuff. I like to tell them that if it wasn't the Air Force, they'd probably get sunk. The next thing, there were 9 Brewster buffaloes turned up. Yeah, somebody remarked that they were pretty baby-faced when we got our wings in those days. That's Geraldton. That was the Wings Parade. I'm actually marker, front row, right on that end. And what's next? Oh, that's it, the Boomerang. First of all, we got these Brewster buffaloes turned up at the Pierce Air Base. I can't quite recall how we got them, but anyway, they turned up there and we all had a go at flying them. And eventually they chose, there were 9 aeroplanes, so they chose 9 of us pilots to fly them. So we formed what they called a fighter flight. Buffalo was a nice aeroplane to fly, actually. They were obsolete. They didn't have enough power. The armament was very, very poor, but they were nice to fly. They cruised about 190, and that was a nice speed to do a roll. And you could do it. It wouldn't lose any height. You just lift the nose 10 degrees, whack the stick over. Didn't have to worry about any footwork at all, and you'd come out with your nose on the horizon. You could do it as often as you like. But the trouble was we couldn't maintain them. We didn't have any spares, so one of the 9 was sacrificed and cannibalised for parts, and we continued to fly the others while we could. However, eventually, first of all, we were transferred down to Dunreath Golf Club, and we were flying off the fairways there. It's no longer a golf club, it's Perth International Airport. But I was flying off fairways there before they finished the first runway. And eventually they finished the first runway, and about that time we were re-equipped with boomerangs. The first flight of them, 12 of them were brought over, a chap called Roy Goon, and I'm not sure whether Roy's still alive. He's well into his 90s now. I used to call and have lunch with him over in Melbourne, but some of you here might remember Roy. Marvellous chap, Chinese background, but born in Australia. And he led the first 12 over. They landed in Dunreath at about 2:30 one afternoon. We'd never seen a boomerang before. So we're having a bit of a poke around, asking a few questions to the ferry pilots. And about 4:30, Chris Daly, our squadron leader, came down and he grabbed me. He said, "Blue, we've got to get these aeroplanes up to Exmouth Gulf." He said, "The Yankees are screaming their heads off about the Japs coming over and dropping bombs on their submarine mothership." But he said, "One of them is due for a 2:40 hourly and we can't do that." He said, "The crew for that are up at Cundon." So he said, "I want you to take it up to Cundon, get the job done as quick as you can and come back." So, okay, so I got one of the ferry pilots I sat in the cockpit and he showed me what to push and what to pull, and I took it up to about 3,000 feet to find out what happened when you put the wheels and flaps down. Came back and landed, got my toothbrush and pyjamas, whizzed up to Cundon. I got there just before last light, taxied in, switched off the motor. Before I knew what had happened, I'm surrounded by instructors and pupils and hundreds of them, and they're all asking me questions. What's the service ceiling? What's the top speed? Blah, blah, blah. And all I can say is, I don't know. Eventually, one of the instructors said to me, he said, "You don't seem to know much about the aeroplane you're flying." He said, "How many hours you had on these?" I said, "Well, I've never seen one myself over this afternoon." I said, "I've got 50 minutes." I don't think that had happened today. No. Anyway, it had to be done in those days. So we went up to Potshot anyway, up to Exmouth Gulf, and they were building the first runway there at the time, but they were still working on it, so we used a little dirt strip. I think there's a civil strip there now, a sealed one, but in those days it was just dirt, and of course as soon as you turned on the runway and opened the throttle, it was just a great cloud of dust, and it was quite an interesting exercise to get a flight of 4 off as quickly as possible, believe me. Anyhow, a little bit later, someone in airboard, I presume, discovered that we original 9 pilots, although we'd been flying fighters for almost a year, we'd never been trained to fly them. Well, that would never do, so they shot us over to Mildura, to number 2 operational training unit, to learn how to fly fighters. So we went over there, and fortunately I got onto Kittyhawks. 7 of the 9 got onto Kittyhawks. And I was posted to 75 Squadron, which then was based at Goodenough Island, just north of Milton Bay. I flew with 75, well, right through there for the next 9 months. In Goodenough, we used to do a bit of escort work for Vengeances who were, they'd stage through Kirrawheena, refuel there, and then go up and drop a few bombs and that on Gasmata and various other installations on New Britain, a few things like that. And then next thing we were sent up to the Markham Valley, NABZAB. We operated from there all over the place, and we where did we go from there? I think we did the first attack on Wee-Wake from there. We escorted some B-25 bombers on a surprise raid, flying up in behind the mountains where they couldn't get us on radar because all the strips were down on the coastal plain up there. And we flew up there and in behind the mountains, popped up through a pass of the mountains and swooped down across there. And the bombers letting go with their clouds of little bombs on parachutes with long detonators that had explode just above the ground and wipe out everything. Very effective. Well, we gained as much height as we could in case we got some opposition, but we got them by surprise. But the interesting thing about this, when we're being briefed about that raid, very, very detailed briefing, and at the end of it, the intelligence officer came on and he said, "I suppose you'd like to know a bit about what the opposition might be." He said, "As far as we can gather, we had a photo recce over late yesterday." He said, "There are more than 200 serviceable fighters on the strip." Sounded a little bit much to, 24 of us and against 200. There's a bit of a silence for a few seconds, and then Phil Crothers, he was always a great guy, he came up, he said, "That's bloody good." He said, "That's 6 each." Positive thinking, that's what you want. Anyhow, that was it. We attacked a whole lot of places there. Then we went, I'm forgetting about this thing. Oh, that's the old Brewster Buffalo. Actually, that's me in the cockpit too. But that's at Dunreath Golf Club. And if you can see remnants of a bit of construction in the background there, that was where they were building the first runway, which is now Perth International Airport. Then we went up to Idapi. Actually, that was an interesting one because the Americans landed there, and the Australian Airgun Construction Squad, I think it was 2 ACS, they came in behind them and with little bulldozers and repaired the airstrip and filled in all the bomb holes and whatnot, and we were down at Cape Gloucester in New Britain, and they called us up and we came up with 3 squadrons of Kittyhawks. We had a fairly interesting time there for a few days because the enemy were not very far away, and you had a few bullets flying around you before you got your wheels up, so it was quite interesting until they were pushed back a bit. We had one lot there, the Yanks called us up, and they're having a bit of a problem over on the northern side. There's a creek coming into running down into the sea, and the arrangement was that they would pull their troops back on this side of the creek at a certain time, and we were to come in 5 minutes later and blast everything on the other side, which we did. And when we got back, the intelligent bloke said, "Oh, the Yanks are screaming their heads off here. They reckon you've been shooting at them." And we were damn certain we hadn't, as long as they'd done what they said they were supposed to do. It turned out that it was the empty shell cases, because, you know, .5 shell cases, those Kittyhawks with 6.5s firing 600 rounds a minute each, is quite a shower of heavy brass shell cases coming down. They were bouncing off their helmets and whatnot, and I reckon they were being shot at. But anyway, we went up to Hollandia from there, and from there we covered the invasion of Biak Island. Long way there. We were often in the air up to 4.5 hours, between 4 and 4.5 hours. It's a long way to go up and cover the landings, but there was some opposition at one stage, but we'd only just left there and another squadron had taken over, so they got mixed into them and knocked off a few, but we missed out on that one. At Nongfa, that's when my tour was up after 9 months, and I had actually done 74 missions at that time with the squadron, and a friend of mine, Maury Barden, came up to relieve me. He took over my aeroplane, which I think is, that's the flagging, and there we are. That's 571, that was my first Kittyhawk was 448, which incidentally was salvaged from New Guinea in 1975 by Charles Darby and taken to New Zealand and restored, and they offered me a ride in it. They put another cockpit in there, so yeah, I've had a ride in it again after 50 years. Time, righto. Sorry about that. Oh, there it is, restored. Thanks, Brian. And so I had to stay on and do one more until another pilot turned up, and poor old Maury went out on his first mission and never came back. So I did another one, so I ended up doing exactly 75 missions in 75 squadron. When I came back to Australia, I was given a lovely holiday. They gave me a Tiger Moth at my own mechanic and said, "Go up to Broome and look after all the radar units around the area there, Cockatoo Island, Cape Leveque, and all over the place there." So I did 2 trips a week around there. I was there for 4.5 months, and I had a lovely time. It was great. I used to, coming back down Cable Beach, I used to run my wheels along the sand there and frighten hell out of the boys if I could, if they were out there having a swim. I did that one time, not long before I came south again, and there was a mate of mine. I saw him on the beach there, and so I came down and went pretty low across his head, you see, and just sat there and waved at me. So, I'll shift him. So I did another circuit around and came down with my wingtip about 2 feet from the ground, came at him, and so he jumped in behind the Jeep there. And then when I hadn't been high enough to see the airstrip, and when I got up over to the airstrip, there's a big DC-3 parked on the strip. When I went in, Bob Hodges was the CO, base CO at the time. He came out, he said, "Lou, I hope you didn't beat him up out of the bush today." I said, "Well, I did, Bob." Oh, he said, "That DC-3 there," he said, "that's Squadron Leader Fletcher." He said, "He's the Air Safety Officer, Western Area." I said, oh yeah. He said, look, go and have a shower and change and stay in your quarters until I send for you. So eventually Leo Frost, a lovely old chap who was in World War One, and his first, he was telling me about, he's put in balloons. They put some crazy so-and-so got the idea if they put a balloon on a 1,500-foot cable behind a destroyer, the bloke in the basket could look out for submarines. So Leo was given this job to do. He said after the first 2 or 3 minutes, he said, I was hoping to God we'd sink quick because they were so crook. He said that once they crank up to about 27 knots, he said, this damn thing's going whoosh all over the place. He said, you couldn't get more crook. Anyway, Leo was a lovely man, and he came over and picked me up, and he took me over to the mess, and he said, it's a squadron leader Fletcher. Fletcher said to me, he said, were you flying that moth out of the beach this afternoon? I said, yes, sir. He said, that was very dangerous. He said, don't do it again. I said, no, sir. And that's all I ever heard of it. And I found out later that Leo and he were great mates, and I think Leo must have put in a good word for me. So thank God for that. Anyway, to finish off, I was very privileged indeed back in March to go with my son Kevin in the Stinson Reliant over to the Avalon Air Show. Kevin's got 3 aeroplanes, a Tiger Moth, Chipmunk, and the Stinson Reliant. He was going to fly that up here today, but his airstrip was a bit too soggy, he couldn't get off. He had to drive up. And it's been a great privilege really to give this little talk today, and I want to thank the Old Fliers group for their generosity, and especially the Bryants for their help indeed. I've written this book anyway about my life. Really, I did it for the sake of my family, because my grandchildren have no idea of what things were like in those days, and I thought it might be an idea. That was the original idea, and then somehow or other I got mixed up with a publisher who published a book of poetry for me. I never thought about having a book launched for the poetry, so this is bush poetry, because we've spent a lot of time in the bush. Anyway, I've got some copies of the book there if anyone's interested, and I thank you very much for listening to me today. People forgetting about these. That's a couple of our Kittyhawks taking off up in New Guinea. You can see what the conditions are like sometimes. And that's Jack Congo Pinamont, who was our squadron leader in those days. Terrific guy, he really was. I think he might still be on deck somewhere over east. Oh, that was me, so.